From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Friday, October 11. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has called out China's manoeuvring in the South China Sea in a speech to the ASEAN summit. The PM says international waterways should remain open. A bombshell revelation from a new episode of The Australian's investigative podcast, Bronwyn. John Winfield fathered a child in 1972 when he was a teenager. Now his long-lost daughter has come forward to try and help solve the suspected murder of the woman Winfield married more than a decade later. John Winfield has always denied any involvement in Bronwyn's disappearance or suspected murder. Episode 13 of Bronwyn is available now for The Australian subscribers. Join us to listen at bronwynpodcast.com. Abortion was not an issue in the Queensland election until suddenly it very much was. Today, how a rogue issue took off in the down and dirty campaign that's suddenly taken an unexpected twist.
You know my position. Neither of those are part of our plan.
This is Queensland opposition leader David Crisafulli on the campaign trail as he storms through Queensland.
And I have been very, very firm on it. I'm not going to join.
And this is The Australian's reporter Lydia Lynch.
And my position is there will be no change.
Well, can you explain how?
I'm being upfront with you and telling you there will be no change.
But can you please explain how?
That is as definitive as I can be. And on either of those issues, I've been very upfront.
Lydia has been on the trail with Crisafulli, visiting farms and factories and burning up miles of freeway. And every time he steps off the bus, Lydia is there too.
That others are trying.
These are people in your own party that are talking about it, Mr. Crisafulli. So I think it's a fair question to ask if your position from 2022...
It's about abortion, an issue that has done what issues do to leaders in election campaigns. That is, it's gone wild. Abortion as a policy went from being a nothing burger to a very big something burger that no matter what he does, Crisafulli can't get rid of.
In Queensland, usually a politician can be facing scrutiny and then just duck up to the regions for a couple of days to take the heat off. But in an election campaign, there's an entire contingent of press gallery journalists following them around all day, every day. So that scrutiny just is magnified.
Here's Lydia. She's just come from a sugar refinery visit with Crisafulli.
We went down the road about an hour from Mackay today to a town called Serena, and we did a bit of a tour of a sugar refinery there, and we got to watch David Crisafulli taste, I don't know how many different types of rum he tasted, but I'm sure he was happy he did the press conference before that tour.
Did you get any rum?
No, I steered clear. I had stories left to write.
Here's the state of play. In Queensland, as in the rest of Australia, abortion is basically safe, legal and rare. In 2018, the Labor government in Queensland removed abortion from the criminal code.
Before that, it was a crime to have an abortion in Queensland. When the laws passed in 2018, the LNP gave its MPs a conscience vote on the bill, which means they're allowed to vote how they personally feel. They don't have to vote on party lines. And every single MP voted to keep abortion in the criminal code, except for 3 MPs. That was Tim Nicholls, Jan Stuckey and Steve Minikin. They faced serious backlash from party members and also from the Liberal National Party headquarters, which threatened all 3 of their pre-selections for the next election. So ahead of the last election, I put questions to the then leader, Deb Frecklington, asking what the plans were on abortion. She said to me, if they were elected, she would bring about a review to look at lowering that gestation limit from 22 weeks and maybe putting in some sort of compulsory counselling for women that were seeking an abortion. They didn't win that election, so the issue kind of died off. Everything changed this week when video emerged of 2 of David Crisafulli's LNP MPs making comments at public forums. One of those was Tony Perrott. He's a frontbencher. He's a member for Gympie. He was asked about abortion at a public forum and he said, I've always voted against it and I'll continue to do so into the future. But really the big quotes that really kicked it off was from a long-serving backbencher, John Krause. He represents the area of Scenic Rim, which is just sort of southwest of Brisbane.
I see some serious issues with the present law and would certainly be a part of bringing about like-minded members to try and deal with those issues.
That really sent a red flag out to voters that it might not be such a decided issue amongst the LNP if there's people inside David Crisafulli's party room that are signalling their plans to either roll back the legislation or at least put in some more restrictions around abortion.
What do you make of the way he's responding to it, Lydia? He just doesn't want to talk about it, does he?
That's right. I think I've asked him about abortion for 4 or 5 days in a row. It became, again, a more heightened issue for him when Robbie Katter, who's a crossbencher in Queensland, he committed to introducing legislation straight away into the parliament after the election that would either repeal or make it harder to get an abortion in Queensland, essentially. Traditionally in the LNP, there's a really long-standing practice that on matters of life or death, MPs are given a conscience vote. So they don't have to vote on the party lines, they can make up their own mind. But David Crisafulli for 4 days has refused to guarantee that his MPs will have a conscience vote on this. He can say every day it's not part of my plan, and it might not be part of his plan, but it's part of Robbie Katter's plan to introduce this legislation. And there are quite a number of MPs in the LNP party room and also candidates that are running in winnable seats who have very staunch pro-life views. And I don't think on an issue like abortion, which is a very emotive issue for a lot of people and a lot of MPs, if there's a bill before the House that's going to put some restrictions around it and you're a very pro-life person, it's hard to see how they would not vote to support that legislation.
So Labor has very successfully set a trap or created a wedge where Crisafulli is now every day having to talk about this, the thing that he wants to talk about least, right?
He's completely wedged on this issue, and that's why he's not saying whether or not he's going to give his MPs a conscience vote, because if he does give them a conscience vote, he'll be very likely reneging on his promise that there'll be no changes. But if he doesn't give them a conscience vote, there'll be complete uproar in the LNP because, like I said, it's a really long-standing practice in the party that they can vote freely on matters of life and death. I think the way that it will have the most cut through is with social media, and Labor's really ramming this on their social media advertising.
Coming up, the Labor candidate's own car crash moment. In every election campaign, there's a lot of serious policy being discussed, and then there's just silly moments of joy that must make your life worth living as a reporter on the campaign trail, Lydia, like when the Premier forgot the name of his own Labor candidate. Tell me what happened.
Oh, yes, that was fun. We were out following Stephen Miles as he was campaigning in one of the Katter's Australia Party seats of Morani. The Premier spent 2 days in that seat. And a few of us journalists noticed that we hadn't seen Labor's candidate for that seat despite 2 visits in 2 days. So one of the other reporters asked him, where is your candidate for Morani? And the Premier's answer, he said, I'm not sure where they are. I'll find out.
I'll find out where they are and let you know.
And as soon as he said they, I got a bit suspicious. I thought, he doesn't know this candidate's name.
What's the name of your candidate, Morani?
I don't have that detail in front of me.
You don't know the name of the candidate that's running for your team in the seat that you're in today?
Susan? Yeah, of course, it's Susan. Yeah. I was with her the other night.
Luckily for the Premier, his deputy, Cameron Dick, was standing behind him and could offer up Susan Tedder's name to the Premier, but it was a bad gaffe, and really you think the Premier would be being briefed by the gaggle of advisors that are following him around the state.
How did he recover from that, and what do you think it tells us about how he's enjoying the campaign?
The Premier does seem to be pretty upbeat throughout the campaign for somebody that's on track to lose, according to every opinion poll that's been published for a year, though he didn't seem too happy with the media the next day. He didn't go as far as apologising to Susan Tedder for forgetting her name, but, you know, he said, I'm going to forget things from time to time, and if you all want to make that the lead of your bulletins, that's up to you.
He's taken a bit of a hospital pass, hasn't he, this Premier? He took over from Anastasia Palaszczuk, a long-serving and very dominant character in Queensland politics, and now he's the one left to steer the ship away from the rocks if he can.
And that's the feedback that we're already hearing, or I guess the line that's already being fed to some journalists from people inside the Labor government, is that Anastasia Palaszczuk should have left sooner to give Stephen Miles time to make his mark. But, you know, Queensland is a weird state, and although all signs are pointing to a pretty strong Labor defeat, things can change here. As Scott Morrison discovered at the 2022 election, Queensland was a state that delivered him that miracle victory. So it'll really depend on how the next 2 weeks of campaigning goes for both leaders, I think.
Lydia Lynch is the Australian's Queensland political reporter. Queenslanders go to the polls on October 26, and we'll be bringing you all the thrills and spills at theaustralian.com.au.